Howell is absent with notice. McGillivray?
Here.
Powell is running a little late. Charles?
Present.
Long?
Here.
Moss?
Here.
Marco?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Excellent. Okay, let's please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Next up, I have approval of the minutes from the November 30th meeting, moved by Commissioner Moss, supported by Commissioner McGillivray. All in favor of approval of the minutes, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Minutes are approved. Next up is approval of the agenda for today. Moved by Commissioner Moss, supported by Commissioner Charles. Any additions, deletions to the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor of approving today's agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Agenda is approved. Is there anyone here who wishes to address public comment at this time? Seeing no one, I will close public comment. And next up is communications. I need a motion to receive and file. Commissioner Charles, supported by Commissioner Long. We prompt the vote, right?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on this communication? Okay. Yeah. We're on 7A, Charlie. Yep.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion carries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep, okay. All right, next up, we have item 8, our department recommendations. Item 8A, authorizing the waiving of polio vaccination fees and associated administration fees. Moved by Commissioner McGillivray, supported by Commissioner Charles. Okay, somebody gonna tell us about this one?
Yes, good morning. I'm on video. Can you see me?
Hi, Leanne. Yes, welcome this morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Ms. Stafford.
I also have Dr. Faust with us to talk about if you have any questions regarding polio. So what we wanted to bring to you is a request to waive up to 1,000 polio vaccination fees. That includes both what it is to get the vaccination and also the administrative fee. As you probably have read recently, there was a case identified in New York of polio in America that used to be an eradicated disease, but now it is circulating in the community, in the United States. So CDC is looking to run and lead a program where they're testing wastewater for polio. Very similar to what we did for COVID. They're leading the project. And so we said, well, what can we do if they decide to test in Oakland? Being the public health department, what can we do? And that was really to be proactive and preventive and try to increase our vaccination rates for polio in the community. We know that the majority of the population is vaccinated for polio, but we also know there is, many people in the community that do not have full protection, or maybe it's waned as an adult. So what we would like to do is reduce or eliminate the barriers for someone to get this polio vaccine. And that would include kids or adults, opening our doors and just having people come in and they wouldn't have to worry about any out-of-pocket costs. So that's what this request is for.
Thank you. I see Commissioner Charles has a question.
Yes. Hi, Leanne and Dr. Faust. Good to see you both. I was interested in asking the chair, Ms. Markham. It says here in the resolution, I believe, that you're the sponsoring commissioner, and I don't know. I just think this is important, and is that a time where others would say, hey, I want to be listed as well, or is it kind of mute? Or I should say, is it kind of moot? That where it says foregoing resolution Gwen Markham. If it's a thing, I'd like to add my name, but if not, then whatever.
Sure. I don't have any problem with that.
And Chair Markham, this is Michael with VOC staff. I just want to let the other commissioners know that it is standard practice to add the committee chairperson's name on that. And as Commissioner Charles has pointed out, at any time, if a commissioner would like to add their name onto it, staff will take that feedback, and we will certainly update the resolution.
Okay, so if you want to be on it, make sure staff knows. Commissioner Moss. Was that it, Commissioner Charles? Okay, Commissioner Moss.
Thank you. I don't remember what year this would be, but I think I had been like about 7 years old and in second grade when they called us all into down from school. I think it was Wilson School in Middletown, Ohio, and called us all into the library, and they had lined us all up, and they had these little cups. And they had us all drink it, and it was wasn't the Salk, it was the Sabin vaccine. I went and told my mother, and she was like, hallelujah, no more polio. I mean, what a scourge polio had been. Obviously, we all know about President Franklin Roosevelt, and every summer, the panic, people fled. It was just an awful thing, and all of a sudden, just like that, there wasn't going to be any more polio. And I'm also a member of the Rotary Club. And the International Rotary Club, one of its top objectives is the eradication, final, of polio. And for years, polio was only in these little, like Afghanistan and Pakistan and very, very far northern Nigeria, and that's where it was, and they were working on eradicating it. And it was just absolutely aghast to find it's in New York City. So I'm all for anything that we need to do to get this genie back in its bottle and kill it dead, so it's as dead as smallpox. And whatever you need to do, I think this board should be in favor of it. And if that means rounding up all the 7-year-olds and seeing if we can get them to drink it like we did and like I did, I'm all for it. And I'd like my name also on as a co-sponsor. And the idea that right now we would suddenly be testing for polio in Detroit is something that would have been inconceivable even a few years ago. So we're all for it.
If nobody else has anything, Commissioner Cavell. Sorry. Commissioner Charles and Charlie sit next to each other, and it makes it
And then there's Chuck.
hard
And
to come
across from
quick.
Charles Moss.
Yeah.
That's right.
I have to think. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It doesn't come natural.
No, you're good. I had a question about why waiving the fee for 1,000 vaccines? Is that just a number to start with, or please explain.
We see it is if we can get 1,000 people in here, this is a success. And if it goes over that, we will be back to ask for additional waivers. But we're going to, work hard to get in the community and really try to find those pockets of individuals that maybe don't have the access to get it. And this will allow us to be able to waive those fees, which is great.
Okay, thank you. And then the second thing I was going to say, you mentioned waning protection. If we all got our polio vaccines when we were younger, does that mean we might be at risk of polio, or it lasts for life? Can you help me understand?
So I'm going to let Dr. Faust answer that. And waning may have been the incorrect word. So if it is, Dr. Faust, correct me there, but I'll let him talk about that adult portion.
First, thank you all for the support. I am also of the generation where I was lined up in the gymnasium and given that little cup. And I remember the days when 15,000 people annually were paralyzed by polio here in this country alone. So polio, full vaccination for polio is now not the oral polio vaccine in this country. We haven't used that since 2000. It's the vaccine, injectable vaccine, and it's a series of actually 4 vaccines. That is at 2 months, 4 months, 6 to 18 months, and 4 to 6 years, somewhere in there. But, there are pockets in our community that are, if not non-vaccinated, under-vaccinated. Everyone in the room here is fully vaccinated. But we do have pockets that are under-vaccinated. That is, they have not received the full series. And that is a concern, especially, it's less a concern when we don't have any cases in the United States, when it had been eradicated, but it is no longer eradicated. You know, we have positive poliovirus being detected in multiple counties in New York, and the CDC will now be testing here and also Philadelphia. I'm not sure whether I answered your question in that long rambling, but
Yeah, that checks out. Thank you.
thank you.
That's all.
And one of the reasons that we are concerned more than other locations is that we had the situation where we had a measles outbreak here that started in New York as well. So this is maybe not the only reason, but is that part of the decision to go ahead and do this, is to try and head that potential off? I mean, are those the communities you're looking at, the ones that we had the measles outbreak in before?
I mean, we're looking at all high risk, right? So I think Dr. Faust said it well. We know there's pockets that are unvaccinated, right? Maybe there's households that don't believe in vaccines. And so our focus is not just one area, it's really lots. I think, you know, you've heard a lot about about vaccines being decreased, people not getting their vaccines because of COVID, whether it's access, whether, you know, people couldn't go to the doctor because they were closed or whatever it is. So we know that the vaccination rates have decreased, especially with kids. So this helps build on to the projects that we're looking at to try to increase that, as well as boosters, right, for adults, or, you know, finishing those series in all areas of Oakland County. Our best way to eradicate this again is to get the vaccine rates up as high as we can. So really it's for every piece of, you know, every community and every person in the population here in Oakland County.
Well, I certainly agree with the goal to get polio out of here and get it out of Michigan and Oakland County. And I fully support us paying for the vaccines so that that cost is not a barrier to people. And they're willing, if we say you can come get a free shot, people will do that, I think. So, okay. If no, Commissioner Charles.
I wanted to get permission from you, Madam Chair. I have a question for Leanne, but it's not germane to polio, but it is a vaccine question. Is it okay if I ask?
Sure.
Leanne, myself, I won't disclose who else at this table, but both of us got our 4th booster back in September from your wonderful folks across the way there. I was a little concerned when maybe in the last 2 months, they were talking about get the new vaccine that would help support all of the various things that are coming our way. So can you set my spirit at rest here in terms of the September, and you know, September through now, all of those shots are good shots for what we're faced with now?
I am going to let Dr. Faust take that. And I think you're talking about the newly released COVID vaccine, correct?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So the booster that you've received, the latest booster is the bivalent booster, and it is effective. It was designed against the original SARS-CoV-2 and also the BA5, BA4 variants with their mutations. There, you know, as this virus, SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, kind of approaches being an endemic virus in our species, we can expect regular updates to that vaccine, similar to what we see with influenza. And that is, right now, with every active infection generating additional mutations, additional variants, as the WHO, World Health Organization, and CDC look around the world and they see how the new variants are displacing earlier variants, which is what is happening right now here with BQ1 and BQ1.1 is displacing BA5 and BA4. They will be looking to see the clinical effects of those new variants, To displace an earlier variant, they need to be more easily transmitted, they need to be more infectious, but just as importantly, we need to know what the clinical effect is. Unfortunately, the clinical effect of the BQ variants is no different. That is, we haven't seen a surge in hospitalizations or fatalities. And know that the last booster still has effect against the latest variants. Every mutation in the spike protein decreases the recognition of our immunity for that spike protein, that virus. So moving forward, more mutations means decreased immunity, even if we have great immunity to the earlier variants. So again, similar to influenza, I think we can expect moving forward, we can expect perhaps not an annual, but maybe a biannual update on the vaccine.
Thank you. I'll be sure to call with follow-up questions, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, give us a call if you have some follow-up questions. We'll definitely get you that information.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else on the question of the vaccine? Seeing none, let's go ahead and prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Excellent. Motion carries. Thank you for
Thank you
coming
so much.
today.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Next up, we have item 9B, 8B. Oh, I'm looking at the paper, I'm sorry. The paper's got it wrong. 8B, the fiscal year 2022 year-end report. We've all been waiting anxiously for this. I need a motion. Commissioner McGillivray, supported by Commissioner Long. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So you have before you almost 150 pages of financial information in the year-end report that reviews, department by department and fund by fund in terms of where we landed in fiscal year 2022 as compared to what's been included in the budget, either in the adopted budget or through amendments to the budget. We'll give you the Cliff Notes version today. This information, we should emphasize is unaudited. Cheryl and her team are engaged on a daily basis now with the auditors as we go through that phase of the process. So if there are any significant adjustments that are identified through the audit phase, we will keep you updated. To start with the bottom line, at this point, the ending general fund balance for fiscal year 2022 is $270.4 million. So that remains at a very healthy level, equal to about 54% of our annual ongoing general fund budget, so well above the 25% 25% required rainy day fund level, as well as the 30% target level established in our fund balance policy. I should note that the resolution you considered last week and that the full board will take up tomorrow on the Raffaelli settlement uses $39.8 million of fund balance. So that's within, as we discussed last week, that's within the amount that's been reserved in that assigned fund balance. But will be a decline in fund balance. That'll take us down to about $230 million, again, which is still equal to about 46% of our ongoing budget. So still at a healthy level, but obviously we need to continue to manage these funds and our overall budget in a cautious and careful manner. I'm not going to review all the detail here. We did have a number of one-time spending items that happened in FY 2022, all of which were one-time in nature and vetted by the administration and this committee and the board. Those things totaled to about $57.8 million. I should note in particular The one item that's included in the resolution here is a $5.5 million deposit into the Building and Liability Insurance Fund. That's really more of an accounting thing in terms of the actuaries to tell us, what's the expected long-term potential liabilities that the county faces, and that fund needs to be balanced. So there's no actual expenditure happening there to settle a lawsuit or anything. All of that will run through the normal process and come before this body. On the flip side, well, I'll add one more sort of accounting thing here. You'll see on the revenue side, we do have a $13 million negative variance for investment income. That's kind of again, an accounting thing. It's not an actual loss of cash to the county, but under accounting standards, we have to adjust the market value of our investments at the end of the year and recognize that from an accounting perspective. And because of the increase in investment rates, that means that the market value of our investments has gone down. But again, that's not an actual loss of value in those investments. Is that about right, Cheryl?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
So the good news on the expenditure side, the county and its departments continue to do a good job managing expenditures. On the personnel side, we came in about $18 million below budget. That's partly just because we continue to be in a very challenging hiring environment, and partly some other factors involved there. On the operating expenditure side, we came in to $33 million below the budgeted level. Of that amount, $18 million is included in recommended carry forwards for departments to complete one-time projects. That number's a little higher than it's been in the past years, partly because of supply chain issues in terms of sheriff's equipment not being delivered in as timely a manner as in the past. So all of those things combined are what get us to the $270 million figure. There are recommended fund balance assignment amounts. Again, we've tried to reduce the number of those assignments and ensure that any decisions about how county funds are going to be spent run through the regular budget process. So we've reserved the $125.5 million for the rainy day fund, which is equal to 25% of the ongoing budget. We've reserved $25 million for any non-economic risks that the county might face to get to the 30% target level. The $42.4 million for property tax forfeiture activities is the assignment that the Raffaelli resolution will be paid out of. There are a number of miscellaneous one-time things, and that leaves at the bottom line $44 million for future one-time strategic investments. We expect, that's going to take some time to vet and identify what those things might be as we go through the process of prioritizing the county facility needs we've talked about and other potential spending needs and risks. So that's the high-level version, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you very much. I will open it up to the floor. Commissioner Moss. This is Commissioner Moss's last Finance Committee meeting, we think, and I was really hoping he was going to, share his thoughts with us. So.
Share my thoughts. Lord. Well, thoughts or not, there's I guess I represent, at least for the moment, institutional memory, as opposed to institutionalized memory, which is something else. But the thing is that this would be back, I want to say 03, and I had just been named the chair of finance down at Commissioner Markham has now, and we got called into a meeting with me and Tom Law, who was the chair, and I think Dave Moffett, and Brooks and Bob Dado and Lori Van Pelt, it's your predecessor. And basically, Brooks stood up and said, "You're not going to believe this, guys. We don't have unlimited money." And we're like, "Yeah, it's April 1st. Come on, you're kidding us." No. And what happened was the canary in the coal mine was the fall off on the investment income. Instead of it just continuing to go up, it was leveling off and going down. And that's when we said, well, this, okay, this is good. What does that mean? Well, it means that we have less money and we have to start making adjustments, which led to some very severe budget adjustments right then, which we did. I think we took 7% right off everywhere right then. I think Chris Long was here at the time. And I do believe if Eileen Colwell were here, she would also confirm this. And then we started tackling the unfunded liabilities. And that was, that was all because of the of the negative investment revenue figure. So the fact that that's happening right now, and as you know, I've been Mr. Doom here because I've not been happy with the, is it March or April? We have the financial forecast of Palooza, and that's great, but I still point out that those finance figures are still not, have not been borne out by history. So I kind of find that worrisome. Were you expecting this kind of fall off from the investment income?
It's completely a function of, of what's happening with inflation and interest rates, which are now starting to, to creep back down, at least for the last couple of months. So it's not a surprise. It's sort of a one-time phenomenon. That's now built into the numbers. We certainly have the advantage, I think, going forward that we have a transparent, structurally balanced budget, that uses cautious assumptions in terms of our revenue estimates and our expenditure estimates. So I think that gives us a solid base to move forward if there is an eventuality that structural balance isn't there anymore, then we're certainly prepared to make the adjustments that would be needed.
That's what I thought. Okay, so if I may just, I'm going to obviously vote to approve, and I'm not going to say there's anything wrong with this. This is all well done and good news. But like I said, I'm not going to be around here after the first of the year. But those of you who are should be keep your powder dry, because I still see storm clouds, and I still see them. I still see the black clouds on the horizon still getting higher and higher. I can go down some of the things that I pulled out, but my guess is as good as anyone else's. I would pay a real attention to these guys from U of M and their financial forecasts. And before they come up with their next one, I would tell them maybe we should chat about the one you just made. But I find the negative investment revenue figure to be worrisome. And like I said, with that, with those cautions. Well, thank you all very much. If this this isn't the last agenda item, so but anyway. By the way, just real quick side note is Kyle Jen. It's been great working with you. It was great working with you in Lansing. You're much better now than you were then, and it's been a pleasure.
Is that a compliment?
That is a compliment, believe it or not.
Rude.
No, it's not rude, because Kyle Jen, actually, I voted for Kyle Jen to be the House Fiscal Agency Director. Now that can be told, Ms. Cleary was great, but I voted for you. So the good has only gotten better. That was not a left-handed compliment, although I might be giving one or two to somebody, maybe in this
Every resident
room.
we talked to always voted for us, so I don't know.
No, I didn't vote for you, Charlie. So anyway,
That I believe.
Anyway, it has been a pleasure, and I'm just glad that they are lucky enough to have you here. Thank you.
I know.
I think you meant it.
Thank you.
Seems only right to give you the last word in your last meeting.
Well, pseudo.
Oh, man, I had a
From my perspective, not from the.
Oh, okay.
All right, any other commissioners? Commissioner Charles?
I did use the button.
Oh,
I wanted to check on, it could be similar to what soon-to-be finance member emeritus
Yeah, I'm just X.
shared. So I'm looking under revenue variances, and this is when, my good old school board days comes and helps me out a little bit, because you talk about unfunded liabilities or mandates, whatever they're called. And then there was also this thing that, I don't think it's GAAP, but it was something that on our budget, let's say our budget was 100 million, just for round numbers, it would show like 212 million, but that other 112 million was just kind of like the not the overhead, but the legacy costs for like pensions and things of that nature. Do we have that with the county where it looks like we're, maybe it looks like our expenditures are 300 and our revenue is off by whatever number? Is that something we're held to at the county level, or is that an accounting?
We're certainly, held to all of those accounting standards. Specific to unfunded liabilities, we're fortunate to be in a position where both of our retirement systems are very well funded. Our VEBA, which is the vehicle for paying retiree health care benefits, is actually up over 150% funded. And our pension system is right just above 100%. So,
Okay.
Compared to most other state and local governments, we're in an excellent position there. So,
Okay, perfect. And then my second and final for this segment, I suppose, is where it says a second negative variance is 7.5 million federal. I'm not quite seeing where that adds up to. It says 7.5 million, and it says due to appropriation of 7.1, of which 3.1 has been spent. So is that to say like approximately $4 million is being sent back to the federal government?
So not quite. I wouldn't characterize it that way. I mean, that's the largest factor within that $7.5 million figure. There are other items that are included in the detail report. That particular item is a function of, the board authorized $7 million, up to $7 million in spending for the COVID disaster that would be eventually funded and reimbursed by FEMA. As it turns out, the spending has not had to be at that level, thankfully. I think that's the $3 million figure, if I'm recalling correctly. So there's $4 million that we didn't spend it, so it's not going to come in as revenue, so it's a wash bottom line. And then the remainder of that is simply a timing issue that it takes FEMA a longer period of time to review requests and reimburse us, so we'll see that revenue in a future year.
Okay. So as a policy, I'm curious, do we do all that we can to ensure that we don't send money back? Like,
Yes, absolutely.
I think of Head Start, they try not to send not a single cent back to the federal government. So we have that as a kind of an understanding here.
Correct, and I think we've ensured, specific to COVID, there have obviously been a number of funding streams, and we've worked very hard with both the health department and the emergency management department to ensure that we're spending those funds in the most effective way possible and maximizing the use of federal funds to avoid having to spend county funds where we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Charles. Anybody else? Commissioner Cavell?
Thanks, Chair. I have, I think, 3 or 4 quick questions. You mentioned $18.1 million for in the wait for it.
Total personnel expend.
Boom, there you go. That's right. Yeah. That's what it is. Total operating expenditures, the next bullet point, sorry, is $33.1 million below the budgeted level, and 18 million of that has been approved for a carry forward into the next fiscal year for departments to complete one-time projects. Can you help me understand what that means? Because to me that sounds like does the board ceding what could be its authority over that money to allow you to do what you want to do with your departments as a side of the executive, but also is that just us giving you $18 million to do department projects?
Well, there is a list of the $18 million in spending authority that's being carried forward.
Oh, good.
And by adopting the resolution that goes with this report, you know, you're
Okay.
effectively approving those dollars to continue to be available to those departments to spend it. So, you know, if you have questions regarding any of those items, we're happy to answer those. You know, in some cases, those are, you know, those are things the board specifically appropriated as one-time projects that just haven't gotten done because of, you know, the short time period. In some cases, it's things like, you know, departments managing within their budgets to have the funds remaining to do replacement of equipment and not have to ask for, you know, for an increase in their budget.
Understood. Could you, and happy to do this offline if, you know, it's not really accessible, but is there a specific section in this big report where we could find that?
Yes, there is. Was either of you have the page number? Oh, there it is. It's page item 33 of the report.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And then with the, talking about the $42.4 million for Raffaelli and related property tax liabilities, will we have to consider that in the future when we think about the budget? Or not just specifically about Raffaelli, but since that court case has changed precedent, is there things we should be prepared for related to budget about that?
I mean, I think that's a discussion that's probably best directed at Corporation Counsel. But,
Okay.
But certainly we need to be aware of, you know, if there is ongoing litigation in that area.
Okay, thanks. And then we've talked about childcare fund before. Can you just refresh my memory? Because it's also in part of these funds, and I was trying to understand the language in your report about the, there's a operating favorability in the fiscal year 22 budget. Part of the reason for that is lower child care fund caseloads and expenditures. Now, this is state funds that come to us, right?
So this is an extremely complicated topic.
Okay.
And one I think we need to do a deeper dive on.
Okay.
But, you know, generally, the state pays 50% of those costs. So,
Yes.
you know, we've had lower caseloads and lower costs, both, you know, partly because of the pandemic, partly because of, you know, I think policy changes in the system. So that has lowered our expenditure. But, you know, as we have lower expenditures, we also obviously don't have that 50% reimbursement. So it's sort of
Right.
partially offsetting.
Okay, but if I'm reading this right, we're getting more money. We have higher favorability than expected.
Correct.
So
We're spending less.
right.
Yes.
Okay. So then, could it be fair to assume that we have like way less child care caseloads than we expected because we're spending so much less? Or is that too much of a presumption? And
That's as a broad statement. That's correct. I don't have
Okay.
you know, specific figures
Got you.
at my fingertips.
Understood. And then the last question was, we have $44 million for future strategic investments, which I think you mentioned are not yet assigned, but could be used for things like the big capital improvement thing that Chair was championing, right? Or other things that we determined to be worthy of investing in with this, but right now unassigned, right?
Assigned broadly, but not specifically allocated for any particular project at this time.
Okay, and because then my question was, why would there be $44 million unassigned and then another $1.3 million unassigned? But you're saying they're broadly assigned.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks. Can you then,
And that's all part of, you know, the changes to the fund balance policy that we worked with all of you on last year to say, you know, we're going to make sure we're very clear about how much of this is our, you know, is for our rainy day fund that we're not going to touch unless there's a decline in revenues.
Yeah.
You know, how much is needed for other things. And then here's the available pool of funding that could be used for one-time projects that have a long-term, you know, return on investment for the county. But we're going to make sure that those things get vetted, you know, through the regular budget process before anything happens with those.
And that's what the assignment, broadly speaking, is of the 44 million?
Correct.
That one-time, long-term? Understood. Okay, thank you for that refresher. I'm good.
Anybody else? Seeing no other comments, let's prompt the vote on the fiscal year 2022 year-end report. I do want to say to the Finance Committee, I appreciate your willingness to come to a special meeting today to get this all done. I know Mr. Jen and I spoke last week, and they were really scrambling to try to get it done, and they were up all night and going to be here in their PJs, and it was like, no, let's just do it right and get here.
I don't think I made that specific threat. Yes.
But yeah,
We appreciate your
just giving you
patience
the
as well.
time to get it done right, I really appreciate the committee's willingness to have an extra meeting, so.
I was wondering what your
Sure you have
PJs would look
68,
like.
so-
Passed unanimously. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
See you tomorrow. All right, next up, we have item 9 from the Economic Development and Infrastructure Committee recommendations, creation of the Oakland County Transit Division. I need a motion. Commissioner McGilvery, supported by
For real.
Commissioner Charles. Thank you. Okay, let's have the Economic Development Division come on up and talk to the Finance Committee about this. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Some of you were here for economic development, but some of you were not. So let me know if I'm repeating myself too much. But this resolution brings forward the creation of a division within economic development and 3 positions to work on implementing the transit millage that was approved in November. But we thought we would also use this as an opportunity to give you a sense of what we've done since the passage of the countywide millage since November. Because as you know, in the previous structure, the Oakland County Public Transit Authority was the organization that had the contract with SMART to provide transit services within that footprint of communities that opted into membership with OCPTA. Now, after you all put on the ballot and it was approved by the voters of Oakland County, those funds flow into the county. And now we are the entity that will hold the contracts with the transit providers. So you'll see that the one thing that this resolution does is establish an enterprise fund where the millage proceeds will flow into, and then the positions that will help us implement the planning around the transit services countywide. Since the election, Brett and I, and Chairman Woodward has participated in a number of these outreach opportunities, but we have met with the Older Persons Commission, Western Oakland Transit Authority, Northern Oakland Transit Authority, and SMART, because our goal is initially, and our goal is by your January meeting, to have contracts in place with all the current providers so that we ensure continuity of services. We are also hoping and talking to each of those entities about what expansions they might undertake in the first year. So they are getting back to us. So you may see the potential ability of ANOTA to expand now that they're not limited by the borders of the communities that they were currently operating in. So there'll be other expansions that will take longer as it takes to get buses and drivers and other things that need to fall into place. But our first step is to get contracts in place with the current providers. So we've met with all of them. We have met with the RTA to utilize their expertise in terms of the role that they play as a pass-through of funds from the state and the federal government. We hope to use them as it relates to some grants that the region currently doesn't draw down, so that we leverage the millage proceeds to receive more federal and state money. We also had a meeting yesterday with all of the providers together to talk about some of the common issues that came out during the individual meetings. You know, things as simple as, you know, who's doing what services, things like technology, things like ordering buses. You know, there's a lot of common issues that we've identified, and it was a really good, productive conversation among the current providers. We also have plans and hope to do still by the end of the year to meet with the communities that currently or formerly were in the SMART footprint, so that they understand what the change means for them initially. We'll also be meeting with communities like Novi in terms of how this would impact them, again, just preliminarily. And then also, while some of the providers are having these conversations as well, you know, meeting with some of the communities in the northwest corner or on the west side of the county to talk about their transit needs. So we've done a lot of work in these last 3 or so weeks, but the creation of this division and these positions are absolutely essential to the work going forward. So we are going to establish, it will be a small division, but it is modeled after the division that Brett manages. So it'll be kind of on par with planning, but there will be a manager. A manager is the level that Brett's at, so just to give you a sense of that. And then 2 planners within that division. That's what we think is necessary to get started.
Okay. Commissioner Long?
That's what I was looking at. So how many total positions will it just be 3?
3.
Okay, and then it's prorated for $553,000 for this year or next year, and then $636 for the following year, the 24. Okay. So what kind of, I mean, manager transit? So are these positions posted now?
They are not
Okay.
until you approve them.
Okay. That's a couple of them. That's good for now.
Okay. Anybody else have questions?
Sounds awesome.
Commissioner Long, or Moss, sorry.
Thank you, thank you. Full disclosure, God, this is like all ancient history. I think it was somewhere like 95 or something, I was appointed to the Oakland County Public Transit Authority. And for about the next, almost 30 years, I've been on and off, a member of it, 3 times as chair. So, you know, then I was, for 7 years, I was one of the county representatives to the Regional Transit Authority. So I just have some questions on how this is going to work. Now, I see no reason to obstruct this. My own communities voted for this. So, you know, as a representative, I will vote to do that. But I do have a couple of questions. Number one, I mean, I know how it all worked under the OCPTA. It was very, very flat. There was no administrative overhead to speak of. How much is this 553K and then 636K is basically the administrative overhead for administering this program? Yes?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes. And that money is being taken out of the millage proceeds, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm looking at the mechanism for collecting. I'm hearing we're doing this, we're doing that. What is the when I remember the resolution, you say it goes to the county, and I deal with this all the time. People say the county this and the county that. And is it the the Water Resources Office? Is it the clerk? Is it the prosecutor? Is it the sheriff? Is it the executive? We say the county. What is the role of the executive in all of this as opposed to the board?
Mm-hmm. Well, as in any kind of county issue where there's the appropriation of funds, the administration of the program will fall under the county executive, and we will have to come to the Board of Commissioners to appropriate the money.
PA 139.
Mm-hmm.
Good, because I know we had a conversation about that. Great. So the funds will be collected by in the old days, it was collected by the treasurer and then dispersed through the treasurer's office with and it was real simple. It all just went to SMART. Yeah. So that's going to be collected by the treasurer, and then it goes to the executive. Who's going to have the money? You guys going to have the money?
Well, the proprietary enterprise fund will have the money.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
we will come to the board with a resolution to appropriate the money
Right.
to the specific entities.
Like any
Like DIA, the parks.
Yeah.
You know, at some point,
Yeah.
it'll become part of the annual budget process.
right, but it is.
And then it might also, and I hope to get to this point, because the providers would like this, you know, the first year I see as a foundational contract with them. Second, third will hopefully be, you know, small expansions. We may get to the point where we assign a multiple-year contract with them so that they don't have to, you know, every single year get the appropriation. But it's a 10-year millage, and we're just going to have to see, you know, how that goes.
And the intra appropriations of who gets what within it all will be the Board of Commissioners,
Yes.
as in any appropriation.
Right. And
Right.
we have told, just this is a little bit of a separate issue, but you'll remember that in the resolution, separate from the ballot language, you all had placed some dollar amounts for some of the local providers. So you had said, you know, WODA was to receive $2 million, NODA was to receive $2 million, and OPC was to receive $1 million. We have told those providers that from our in our minds, that was a floor, not a ceiling, so that if they came forward with a proposal to provide $3 million of services in an expanded area, then, you know, we would bring that, assuming we support it, to the board to approve that level of funding.
Now, the SMART, of course, is, we know what it is. Question is, I know that there's been some talk about prodding SMART and some of the other providers to either change service or up service or do something that. Is that going to be a function of the executive, or will that be something maybe the board might be looking into? Do you know?
I think all of the above, right? So the executive has 2 appointments to the SMART board. Currently, Brett and I serve as members of the SMART board. And you all will now have, you know, input and influence. Like you'll remember, right, when you signed the contract with the DIA, you had a lot of conversation with them about the services that you hoped that you intended for them to provide as part of that millage, right? More availability for school children, you know, more free whatever, you know, like you struck a bargain with them about what it would take for you all to approve that millage. So I'm assuming that the board will have, you know, input on how well the services are going. I don't know that we're going to micromanage these providers, right? I mean, we're not transit provider experts, but yes, I think that we will have, through all of those avenues, you know, input into the future of transit in the county.
I know that SMART, toward the end of the RTA, my RTA term was actually starting to look at it. Now they are really embracing it, calling it microtransit. I used to say it's Dial-A-Ride meets Uber, that we should be able to do that, and they are actually doing it. And this is great, because this is I think this is the future, not the old line haul. But okay.
And I would just like to say to that, you know, because you're right, and we had this conversation at ED&I. I mean, SMART in and of itself is going through a transformation, you know, and then we have a new general manager who is really, you know, taking a look at things from top to bottom and is bringing some important changes to SMART. But we have to acknowledge that there's a real challenge in terms of drivers and buses, and at the same time, it's going to take us a minute to kind of figure out that transformation that's underway, and it's going to take some planning, which is why we really want to have the expertise within this office, because if you were going to evaluate the fixed routes that are out there, you may actually, and they found this in other areas, decide that a 40-foot bus isn't the solution. That really more micro-transit is a solution. But even how you approach micro-transit is changing. Because, some zones are, this size, some zones are this size. And you have to really, there's a science to that, because you want, people to be able to not wait 30 minutes to get a ride, right? Because then that is frustrating to them. So you have to it's a work in progress. SMART currently privatizes that, right? It is provided by VIA. And I think that they're thinking through whether that is the long-term correct approach, or whether they should get into that type of transportation. Like, for example, we're taking an inventory of all of those buses that you probably see out in your communities, right? Because SMART provides hundreds of buses to communities. Like, for example, in Hazel Park, right, there's a bus at the Hazel Park Rec Center. It's probably not used 20 hours a week. Is it possible that that bus gets put into service to provide flexible service, in that area? So there is a lot of transformation underway.
Has anybody thought,
We'll
or
take
maybe
that bus out in my area.
you certainly can. Is there any thought of making some kind of a baseline study now as to what services are being provided to what communities, how much money is being spent wherever, so that when you come back, I know it's a 10-year millage, so you don't have to go back to the people every 3 or 4 years like we had to with the OCPTA. But nonetheless, to say, well, we have increased A, B, and C, we have increased P and Q, to start with a baseline inventory, if you will. That might not be a bad idea. I'm just throwing that out.
There's a lot of those conversations going on right now. And some of the question is, who's the appropriate entity to undertake that? And is it SMART? Is it the RTA? Is it Oakland County itself? Do we want to bring someone on to help with that type of, specific planning? SMART has a lot of those things in the queue, for example, and I'm surprised no one's raised this with us today. It's one of my pet peeves, but, at the beginning of the year, we're going to be approving an RFP around bus stops. One of my pet peeves is how bad the bus stops are, right?
Tell me about it.
So, and that knowing exactly where they are, what type of stop they are, what type of, having criteria. There's actually criteria that dictates whether you should have a pole, whether you should have a bench, whether you should have a structure, and whether they're in the right place. As it turns out, some of them aren't in the right place, because I didn't even know this, but, Dwight knew enough to know that, when there's a bus stop, there actually should be a bus stop. You should be able to look across the street and see where you're returning to, and that's not necessarily how our system is laid out. That's a problem. Some of the bus stops are like before the intersection instead of after the intersection, so then you got a driver who's stopping here and then stopping there, and so it's not efficient. So we're undertaking, there's undertaking a huge, not huge, I hope it's quick, but there's a lot to this. And while Brett and I enjoy this work, we are looking forward to having, a transit division who can, really spend full time doing all of
It can be a
this.
lot of fun. I know that when I was first named to the RTA board, I was the only one who took the bus down to the meetings. Part of it is that I was a 12-minute walk from Woodward and Maple, where I could just go over and pick them up. So I wouldn't say I did it all the time, but I did it most of the time, and a preponderance of the time. I just took the bus down. It was easier. I didn't have to worry about parking. I could all the good things you hear. And the first couple of years, Detroit would not let SMART stop within the city limits, so you would have to stop and transfer at the fairgrounds. And I would do that within and wait around. I did it in 0-degree temperature. Did it once in the summer when it was well over 9. I was at one where we stopped at a stop, at a bus stop, and there was a giant crowd, and they only allowed so many people on, and closed the door, and the crowd began to hammer on the bus and rock it. I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to be here for Detroit Riot, number 2.0 here. This is how these things start. But the bus driver inched around and got out, and I hope they sent another bus to get those poor people who were waiting there when it was 98 degrees. So, I'm real aware of the physical layout of the bus stops that take you at least down Woodward Avenue. because I rode them. In fact, if you really want to do that, you can pick up the bus and ride it down and get off at the DIA and go to Chartreuse, and you don't have to care how much you drink. You can go pick it up again going home.
Well, I will say, remember,
so
this is an Oakland County millage to provide solutions for Oakland County residents. And for me, I'm looking forward to taking a bus to downtown Rochester to attend Fire and Ice, so that I don't have to make that miserable drive up Rochester Road. So, you know, like, there are opportunities within our county to get to places that people would like to go.
Well, that's my
Comic-Con out at the Suburban Showplace, you know, yeah.
That was going to be my next question. You mentioned the Q line and all that. There's always a back and forth between regionalism, of course, in county, and this new passed millage is aggressively county oriented. And one thing we always had a question, we always worried about with RTA and all is county money going to subsidize non-county entities and non-county providers. How regional are you going to get on this, or not regional at all?
I think that this was this is what was so effective about the millage that you put on the ballot, that it was a solution for Oakland County. I think that as we expand and improve on transit services within Oakland County, that will have a positive impact in the region. For example, you know, once we can get workers out to Novi who need to take a bus to get out there, you know, they may live in Southfield or Oak Park or Royal Oak, but they might live in Detroit as well. So it is going to have a positive impact on the region when we are improving services for Oakland County. But it is focused on Oakland County, and it's focused on improving services in Oakland County. And Brett and I are going to be, you know, very, very conscientious on the SMART board that, you know, when it comes to making enhancements that SMART makes, for example, we don't want to pay any more of the freight that we should be paying of things that service the region. And I'll give you an example of that. It is clear over time that the Oakland Transit Center is going to need to be upgraded. You know, like, it's on the list of things. It's not laid out in a way. It's not efficient. The parking lot's falling apart. You know, you walk in there, it's like the 1950s. I mean, SMART has some investments, like we found with our own buildings, right, that need to be improved. And I can understand if that transit center is primarily for Oakland County Transit, that we would pay for a big portion of it. But on the other hand, the IT is centered there as well. So if our IT division is out there for SMART, well, then that impacts Wayne and Macomb as well. So we're going to make sure that even though we're contributing, you know, we're raising more money from Oakland County, that it's spent effectively.
How are you going to firewall it? I know that with SMART, we would, we had turned over to SMART, and if that meant Woodward Avenue, going up and down Woodward Avenue, we didn't worry too much about that because, you know, people from, you know, like I get on and up Woodward and ride down to Royal Oak, or sometimes ride down to downtown Detroit, or they would drive up and down. There was no real concern about firewalling it within SMART. Are you going to have to firewall it now because the language was quite specific?
You know, Corp Counsel is engaged on drafting the contracts with SMART. You know, currently there's about $32 million spent by SMART in Oakland County. So when we draft up the contract and think through the services that are provided, you know, we're working through that balance right now in terms of how detailed, you know, they will, for your consideration, you know, they'll inventory the services that they're providing and what we're paying for.
Because to court over something like this. So, all right. Well, you know, the brave new world, like I said, I'm not going to obstruct it. The voters have spoken. But I look forward to seeing how we get more service. And like you said, going from where you live to Rochester, that's going to be it's going to be an interesting thing. But you know, please, it's very easy for all of you to get to Birmingham.
Commissioner McGilvery.
Thank you. I just want to pass along, I had two people that I talked to this is prior to the election regarding the millage. One came from Macomb County, East Point, and was coming to Madison Heights. And he had to wait at 2 different bus stops for well over an hour. In one case, it was an hour and 20 minutes. I would hope that scheduling is going to be improved so that it doesn't take a half a day to get to work, for example.
I'd like to echo what Mr. McGillivray said, because it was about 2 months ago where I had to share my car with the spouse. And I'm like, oh, I'll just try this SMART thing since we're getting ready to vote. And it was a horrendous experience trying to figure out where to be, where to stand, where to go. And I was just so grateful that there was I'll call her a super user of the service. She's like, do you have the app? And I'm like, what app? So there's a bunch of useless, meaningless signs at these bus stops with like phone numbers, who's using a phone number, maps and what have you. The only thing they need is to say, download the app. And everything needs to drive folks to the app. It's not searchable on any app store. You can't type in Oakland County Smart. It takes you to all these other things. So just streamlining that is going to be something I'm going to be looking hard for. And when I called, because of course I called, and I was very upset. And I said, I just so happen to be a county commissioner. I don't name drop often, but on that one I did, because I felt like I was stranded, and it was a very unsettling experience. So I ended up taking a cab, which was very expensive. So, but I'm looking forward to the progress. That's what this is about. It's just fine-tuning and getting things right.
It was so horrendous that you actually accepted a ride home from me.
You remember, it was a rough morning. So.
Commissioner McGillivray.
Yeah, I never really got an answer. I got 2 heads shaking at the other end, but is that going to be corrected halfway soon? The scheduling on these buses, so that people don't have to wait for an hour to get their next ride, so it takes them 3 hours to get to work?
You look, Brett and I are members of the SMART board. We hear your frustration. And I just want to say that the passage of this millage is not a magic wand to solving those issues, okay? So I completely share your concern about a number of aspects of the work that SMART does. Customer service, for example, it's a frustration of ours in terms of the experience that you had, how they get back to people. So we want to make sure that we're working with them to improve that. And, the statistics in terms of rides and delays, yes, I hear you. This will make us more part of the fabric of what's going on and more responsible for it, but at the end of the day, we're still not operating the buses. So I can't guarantee you, I nod my head because I will work on it, but I can't guarantee you that I'm gonna be able to fix the scheduling at SMART through this millage. You know what I mean? Like, we will try. We know there's frustrations. They don't have enough buses. They don't have enough drivers right now. So I don't know what that specific issue was, and I don't know what your issue was in terms of the app. We hope that there's an app that can help you, navigate everything. So I know it's not a perfect solution, and I only nod because I know, and I'm not entirely sure that I can fix it right away, but we know that there's a lot of work to be done.
Okay. One other comment, if I can. I'm curious to know, looking at buses running up and down Woodward Avenue, for example, I see 2 or 3 people on it, but yet it's a 50-passenger bus. Do you see that changing at all, where we're going to smaller vehicles? It certainly would be advantageous, to have smaller vehicles if we don't have the people on the bus. So.
Sure, but that's not and that I mentioned that in terms of, that's the evolution that's going on in transit. But right now, all SMART has is 40-foot buses. And so you're not going to see that happen quickly, right? That's going to be over time. So that's not, that's, you can't turn that switch on and off very quickly in terms of getting new types of buses and things. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Cavell?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, just to your point, Gary, I didn't own my first car till I was 27, and Yolanda was kind enough to get, and I'm 32, so it's been 5 years. But Yolanda was kind enough to give me a ride when my current car was in the shop, because I had to get to a meeting, and the one, you had to take 3 buses from where I lived to get to the county, and one was running late, et cetera, right? Story's old as time. So one, I think, I hear you and what everyone's saying, but I think we should give these folks some grace, too, because we did just do something really awesome and transformational, and we are going to start giving them the tools they need, aka Brett getting some staff, and us getting some consultants for the BOC to be able to start putting these plans into motion and fixing it. And as Chair said in the previous committee, that he does want to make sure that us on the board have a role, and like Hillary was saying, we do have a connection point to make sure that we can be heard or our constituents are understood. So one, thank you. And lastly, I just want to make sure that also we caution ourselves, if I could say, against like duplicativeness that could potentially happen if we try to execute things that are not ours to execute, right? We are oversight, we are policy, we are the purse strings, we are not executives. So I just want to make sure that we don't blend ourselves into that.
I know.
What?
I'm just wondering. Keep going.
Okay. Just saying, because this is a big deal, so we don't want to muck it up. And I just want to say that. Am I doing okay?
Commissioner Moss, followed by Commissioner Long.
Thanks.
Well, better duplicative than duplicitous, but
Yeah, right.
if I can just, once again, apropos of nothing, to answer your question and possibly yours, you mentioned it, is that congratulations, because of this, they're going to go yell at you guys instead of us guys on the OCPTA, and having been yelled at about this particular one issue for almost 30 years. One thing I found in riding, at least the Woodward bus, other than those I cannot speak to, is that like Birmingham and part of the northern end is at one end of it, downtown Detroit is at the other end of it. And if you pick up the bus like at Grand Circus Park or even down on Congress, there's nobody on it. You're the only one, only 1 or 2 people on it, but it fills up as it goes. So by the time you're up to Palmer Woods or whatever, that bus is full. And there's standing room, there's people standing on it because it's filled up. Now it starts to let folks off as it goes. And by the time it gets to the end of the line, whether it's Somerset or Pontiac, depending on if it's the 461 or the 462, you'll find yourself once again one of the only people there. So I'm just saying, yes, it looks like there's nobody on it if you're looking at it in say, Bloomfield or Pontiac or whatever, or even down, but the farther you go, the more you people, and it can be standing room only, particularly during rush hour, either morning or evening, on those Woodward buses. So, everyone would say, well, gee, I was looking at the Woodward bus, I was looking at a 15, there's nobody on it. I said, well, I understand that, but it picks up as they go along. So that's just a thought. I got asked that 2 or 3 times a week for almost 30 years. So that's not a bad question. It's just, it's wherever you look at it and wherever you're viewing the bus as it goes down the line. There. And I offer that to those of you who are now going to have the privilege of answering all those questions.
Yeah.
Commissioner Long.
Oh, I just wanted to make a point. I'm hoping that with doing this, that they will find bus drivers, because Oakland County Parks can't, the schools can't find bus drivers. I think it's going to be a huge issue. The school last year had to be like every other 3 weeks, we had no buses. Like they would say, your kid is not picked up today, and they would separate elementary to middle school to high school too. So some moms had to drive no matter what in the 3 weeks. There is no bus drivers out there, just like many jobs. They are not being filled, and I don't know how you're going to get bus drivers. That's just my point. And I realize this passed, but in my district it did not pass. It passed 1 precinct out of 24 by 11 votes, so I'm not even supporting this. I know it's going to go through, but I'm voting no because my whole district voted no. Besides 11 votes made it a yes. So just to explain myself, that's why I'm not supporting this.
Thank you, Commissioner. I had the opposite in my community. 24 out of 25 precincts voted yes, which I believe was a big surprise to some of the folks in my community who have for decades said, we don't really need it out here. 59% of our population voted for it. So, yeah, I completely understand why you would vote against it, representing your
I
constituency.
thought Nova had it already. I couldn't believe when you said.
Yeah, I know, it's,
I mean, 'cause the mall and all the shoppings there, that will work in Nova.
But can I just say that no matter where you are in the county or how you voted on the transit millage, it'll be our goal to create a system that services everyone. So whether it's folks in Hollywood to get to a hospital, you know, in North, and that makes sense to figure out something from Genesee to the northern Oakland County, whatever it might be, we want to make sure that folks
Yeah.
that need the assistance get it.
yep, I completely agree with that. Well, I've sat through 2 meetings on this subject, so I don't need to, if I have any more questions, I'll
You know
ask
where to
you,
find
but
us.
you know where I live.
No matter where you go.
Okay, if nobody else has any other questions or comments for these folks, let's get this bus moving.
Sitting on that all day.
I have, you're right.
Yeah, it worked.
She waited for that since the last meeting.
Whoa, another bus joke, huh?
It was an hour late coming back from Chicago.
Was it? I was thinking about setting up a trip to do that.
It's great if you don't have to be anywhere on time. It's fabulous.
Okay, well, cool.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 1 nay.
All right, motion carries, and we know who voted against it. All right, that concludes item 9A. Next up, we have public comment. Is there anybody from the public who cares to speak to us at this time? Seeing no one, I will close public comment. Do we have any other business to come before the Finance Committee? If not, I'll call this meeting adjourned at 1:22, and see you all tomorrow.
Commissioner on the line, AR.
Yeah,